Mr. Benchwork here. I just wanted to go over how to quickly assemble a module here today and then how to assemble modules to each other. So getting started, when you get your order, it's going to come in a cardboard box just like everything else. Your modules will most likely be shrink wrapped together. If you have larger modules, it is possible that the cross members will be separated from the side pieces, but it should be pretty easy and straightforward to figure out. So getting started, you're going to want to unwrap one module at a time. I usually just use a box cutter. However, you can also unwrap this by hand as well. So whatever you have on hand. So we'll go ahead and set that off to the side. And I'm going to go ahead and set this other module to the side as well. Remember, we're only going to assemble one module at a time. So don't unbundle a bunch of modules at once because you will mix up the parts inevitably and then call me saying something's missing when it's actually not. So every order is going to come with a bag of parts. So in this bag, you're going to have instructions. And these are going to cover all the different components you might get, whether that be your standard modules, your H legs, your L legs, and then it's also going to cover leg placement for the different types of legs. Additionally, very important, on the middle inside page here, there's a descriptor of the two different types of screws. Your 1¼ inch screws, which are the screws you're going to assemble your modules with, are going to come in this 4" by 4" bag. Meanwhile, the 1" screws are going to come in this white labeled bag, and these are going to be for your legs. Now, each module, if it is under 4 feet, it's going to get 2 bolts, washers, nuts, and all that. If it is over 4 feet long, over 48 inches, you're going to get 3 bolts per module. Additionally, in your bag, you're going to find an assembly bit. This is a number 2 square drive, also called a Robertson bit. These are easily procured everywhere. However, I do include one because most people are used to Phillips head screws in the United States. So these screws are really nice. And the reason why I use them in part is because these bits will grab onto a screw and hold it. They don't go flying off like a Phillips head screw would. So, and these bits can be used in either a impact driver like I've got here, or your standard drill. Now, I will say when you install it in a drill, make sure that you only install it as far as you have to. So you'll notice that there's a little indentation here on the back of the bit. You want to just secure from the back edge of that. And the reason for that is you want as much of this bit sticking out as you possibly can. It makes assembly of the modules a little easier. So getting started, your module is going to come with 2 different types of components. You're going to have your end pieces. These are going to be the pieces that are marked with lines and X's where your cross members are going to be. And then your cross members, and these are going to have your pocket holes in them. The pocket holes are what you use to assemble the modules. And the beauty of pocket holes and the way these modules are assembled is even once your entire layout is assembled, all your modules are bolted together and everything, you can still move these cross members around. So, you know, inevitably, like most model railroaders, when you build a layout, you're going to make changes over time. So this allows you to easily remove or relocate a cross members. So if you put in a turntable, for example, last minute, you're not there with a sawzall or a jigsaw trying to cut through cross members. You can just pull out the screws, slide it over, put the screws back in, and you're done. So installing screws is pretty easy. Now, typically what I do is I include screws for 2 screws per side of your cross member. And you're going to want to put them in the outside 2 holes. The 2 middle holes are used as a backup, or in the event you're going to install a cross member that is not centered on your end pieces, but it's offset to, you know, put in a river or something like that. It gives you a couple extra chances to mount this piece of wood in the position you might need. So you can get down to about 1.5 inches, or if you actually turn it sideways, you can get 2 3/4 inches from, or 2 1/4 inches from the top of your benchwork framing to the top of this cross member and still maintain all of your strength. Now, I do suggest when you are assembling modules in mass that you go ahead and install the screws on one side of each cross member. Now, if you have kids or a helpful sibling, this is actually a great activity for them to do because it saves you a little bit of time and lets them participate while still being safe. And I'm going to grab one cross member. Now, you'll notice that these cross members, they have a line and an X on them. It's very important that when you assemble your module that they stay in the same direction on the same side. Because if you don't, you'll notice that they're very off. This isn't always the case. Sometimes they'll line up perfectly, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to have an issue. So you want to make sure that these end pieces stay in the same direction. And you can go ahead and mark these with a pen or a pencil if you really want to on the far ends, just to maintain your sense of direction. But realistically, just pay attention when you flip your piece over. So I'm going to set this to the side temporarily. Now, I'm always going to start with my end plates. So these are the pieces that are going to connect to the next module over. Now, when I install this, I'm actually going to leave a little bit of a lip. And I'll zoom in here if I can. But you basically want the width of your fingernail as a ledge here, because these screws, you'll notice, they actually don't go in straight. They go in on an angle. What that means is when you drive them in, they're going to pull over just a little bit. And it's usually about the width of a fingernail. So I'm just going to hold this down here, take my drill, and I'm not going to go crazy fast. I'm going to go slow. And you'll notice that I kind of backed off at the end and I just barely hit the trigger. That's to slow down so the screw does the work instead of me. It's very important that you not overdrive these screws, because that is the one downside to using pocket holes, is once you overdrive the screw, you either have to switch to a bigger screw or you got to repair the wood before you can try and put the screw back in. So take your time. In some cases, you can use something like a clutch like this has got here and drive it that way. And that'll stop it automatically, but it'll take a little bit of fiddling to get used to. So we'll go ahead and do our second cross member. Now I'm going to switch to the impact driver because this is what I'm used to. That's what I've been using for the last 13 years. So you'll notice that it's a little bit more controllable for me because when I stop pressing the trigger, it actually stops. So this next piece, I'm going to go ahead and flip the module around because I'm left-handed, so my screws are normally going to go that direction. I'll grab my last cross member here, and again, I'll use the same fingernail trick to make sure that this is about lined up before I start driving my screw. So one side's done, you're going to go ahead and take your other end piece and lay it on here and make sure that your line is going to line up with the edge of your cross members. Now in this case I have it backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it around. I've got it the correct direction now. So now I'm going to grab the two ends of the module and I'm going to rotate. This keeps it in the same orientation, which makes your life a lot easier. And then I'm going to go ahead and install the screws. Again, in the outside holes only is typically what you need. Now, if you do order extra screws, or if there are a lot of extra screws, you can fill in those middle holes. And if you do have extra screws, I actually encourage you to, because it does make the module a little more rigid than it would be otherwise. If you're going to be transporting your modules a lot, going to train shows, stuff like that, absolutely put all the screws in. And actually, it might be worth taking the module apart after you assemble it, one side at a time. Once you get the screws in place, pull the screws back out, pull it apart, stick a little glue over the screw holes, and then reassemble it. And what that'll do is that'll keep things from shifting around, and that'll make your module last even longer. If you are not going to be going to train shows or transporting, don't bother gluing. It will just create more hassles than it's worth. So the last thing I wanted to point out is with these pocket screws, the one thing you'll notice is the drill is always going away from you. You're always drilling that way. Unlike the competitor products where you're up in the air and you're doing this, and inevitably you're holding on to things like this. When you miss, you're going to hit your hand. So I really like pocket screws for that reason, as well as it just makes for a nice sturdy product. Now this is super strong as it is, but once you get your other modules assembled and get them bolted together, you'll see that this is just an incredibly strong product. So for those of you who are ordering Benchwork without holes in it, realistically the only difference between assembling a module with holes and a module without holes is you're probably going to be a little more concerned about what it looks like if you ordered the module without holes. So you're going to want to look for plugs. In this case, it's a rectangle, but sometimes they're an oval shape. These do not affect the strength of the material at all. However, what they do is they actually eliminate the defects. So in this case, there was probably a little bit of a knot there. So they got rid of it so it could be sanded smooth. So in this case, you just use the other side instead. So that's really the only difference between the modules with holes and the modules without holes. So, and assembling them is just as fast. Once you have all of the modules for your layout, or at least the modules that you're going to be assembling that evening together, you're going to want to bolt them together. Now, obviously, you'll be adding legs, which I will be covering on a separate video. But in order to attach your modules together, you'll notice that there are 5/16 bolt holes along all the cross members in both directions. And what this does is this allows you to bolt your modules together with even spacing or offset by 6-inch increments. So even if you buy a 4-foot by 8-foot table, for example, you don't necessarily have to assemble it in a rectangle. You can offset it by 6 inches or 12 inches to get more of an odd-shaped surface. Obviously, bolts, they just go through the holes. You're going to want to stick a washer on there and then stick a nut on there as well. Now, I just use a regular 7/16 wrench. You can also get a little ratcheting wrench here. This cost me, it was about $5 or $8 over at Home Depot. And it makes it a lot quicker to assemble and disassemble these modules. The second option you have for attaching modules together is actually screws. So instead of using bolts, you can just use your extra screws you have left over or have purchased. Attaching the modules with screws is actually my preference. And the reason for that is it actually holds the modules together, but it also holds them in orientation as well. So you'll notice that even if I stick a couple bolts in here, that when they're loose, they'll still move around quite a bit. When you use screws, however, it's going to be permanent and it's not going to go anywhere. If you've opted to go with Benchwork without holes in it, you actually have the same two options. Every module still includes bolts, and you can also use screws to assemble your modules. If you do choose to use bolts, you will need to drill holes. I suggest a 5/16 drill bit, and I do actually have these available on my website for $5. It's pretty quick and easy and painless to just drill the holes you need where you need them. And that's actually the beauty of the Benchwork that doesn't have any holes in it. Realistically, you only need to drill holes underneath where your track is going to be for your wiring. So that's the beauty of this Benchwork, is it eliminates the extra holes and makes your Benchwork a little bit stronger, and it also satisfies the requirement to make your Benchwork look nice. So typically when you're building a model railroad, your Benchwork's going to be exposed for a couple of years. So, and a lot of times people are actually finishing this Benchwork now with either stain or paint at least on a temporary basis, just so it looks nice while they're building the layout. This also does a double purpose. It actually, sealing the benchwork actually helps it hold up longer. It protects it from the elements and ultimately makes your significant other happier because it looks nicer. That said, have a great one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.